Hi, John. How you doing?
Good, Paul. Awesome to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, John Doherty, you and I have connected a couple times. We never really got a chance to jump online here and have a good conversation about some of the arenas that you're involved with, dedicated towards, which I really enjoy. And it's a lot of the family history and how that ties into just the broader picture. One thing that it's really been resonating with me is those reflection points, those big points in our life. And then everybody remembers those, but then there's those little moments that we might forget and stuff. But that's where some of the work that you do with your company and just what you're passionate about really help to people, those recognitions or identifications. So before I just continue to rant on, do me a favor. Let's start from the beginning. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, what you're working on, your company, and how you approach the market and stuff with that.
Great, thanks. So my company is called the Family Album Company, and I thought about the name a lot, and I am here to preserve or protect as many family memories as I can. And like your origin story you spoke about is I was 33 when my mom passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I can still remember being in the funeral home after the wake and before you head over to the final ceremony and the burial and stuff like that. And everyone says their goodbyes, and I'm the youngest of 7 kids. So I'm always last, no matter what the occasion. I'm last. And I'm sitting back there with my family, and everyone is going by and saying their last goodbyes to mom and moving off. And my girls go up there with my wife, and they were 7 and 5 at the time. And then they walked away, and the last people there were my son, who was 2 and 1/2 at the time. And my dad was not necessarily a real touchy-feely type of guy. And maybe that's why this really resonated with me. He reached down and grabbed my son's hand, and I was standing behind him. And he said, "Matt, I wish you would have known her. She was an amazing woman." And that I realized he's not going to know who grandma is. There's no recollection. And even my daughters, who were 7 and 5 at the time, don't have great memories, a lot of memories, because my mom was sick the last couple of years. And that's what set me thinking about how I was going to figure out a way that my kids were going to know who grandma was. She was an Irish immigrant, came here on her own when she was 18 on a boat, and used to joke when we were complaining about something. Maybe we had to walk to the store or do something, and she would say, "I was on a boat for 9 days throwing up." I don't want to hear it. I set out then to find as many photos. We didn't have any video, but we had slides, and I wanted to digitize and figure out how am I going to preserve and protect my memories so that my kids know where they came from. And so it's funny, I went about digitizing everything. This was 1999. The digital age was coming.
Yeah.
And
The technology was there, but it just wasn't,
yeah,
it wasn't anything even remotely what
no
we're
one
at
was
today.
thinking about that long-term thing yet. And so I digitized everything. I went online, I Googled, I researched and got this fancy external hard drive, and I was putting everything on there. And I was like, oh, good, it's safe. And you go on with your life, and kids are growing up, and we keep saving photos electronically now. And I went to work I used to be in the financial industry, and then I went to work for a friend of mine because he wanted to build his business. And it was an agency that we dealt with larger clients. Like I worked with Oprah Winfrey's photographers. I did the Wrigley Family Archive, stuff like that. And
Wow.
I'm like, boy, I should plug in that external hard drive. I plugged it in, and it literally went up in smoke.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Oh
because
my God.
the external hard drive was basically a steel record player.
Sure.
I had an arm, and it just went.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh man.
So I paid to have it taken care of, trying to get data off it, paid a lot of money. And basically what I got out of it was a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. No pictures,
Oof.
nothing.
Oh, just like names of the file name or
Yeah, that's
something
it.
like that. It wasn't even an actual file.
I went back to the drawing board and started all over again. And so I don't want people to have to go through that again. The time it takes to do stuff is amazing. And we're all very busy with stuff going on. But I came up with a term. I don't want to give someone a digital file of their family history and let it just sit in a drawer in a hard drive or
Yeah.
somewhere buried in your computer files. So I came up with a term called a living digital archive, because it's living because we're going to keep adding our digital photos to these files as time goes on. I just had 2 grandkids this past summer, and it's
Awesome.
unbelievable. You have young kids. The amount of photos that are being taken is just
Oh
off the
yeah.
charts. So that's why I started my company. I went to my buddy and said, "Hey, I want to bring this to the consumer," and he just didn't have any interest in doing that type of a project. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to go start my own company," and that's what I did.
Oh, that's awesome. How long ago was that?
It'll be 2 years in December.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So that was
That's
my
amazing.
story. That's my origin story.
I love it. No, I love it, man. I can definitely identify with that too. Is my mom passed many years ago, and I was 26, and I remember doing the board,
Yeah.
the foam board, and we attacked a bunch of pictures up there, and then they did actually have a way to loop
Like on the
some
TV screens.
scanning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I scanned in a bunch of the photos, and they just looped it. It wasn't a
Mhm.
very long video, but they
Yeah.
were looping it at the and but it is a way to just immortalize those memories. But and at this to that point too with the kids, yeah, they're not going to remember under the age of I don't know, 7, 9,
Yeah. Who
10. They're
knows?
just one of the memories. My grandmother passed when I think I was like maybe 5,
Hmm.
and I have these snippets like they're almost like photographs in my mind. But the old photo albums are really the only way I would have any access to that memory. And I think if I may, I touched on this too, but I think again, like we use that example as somebody a loss like that. There's so many memories though that honestly we forget. There's those little things. I did go. There was I was going through a storage unit and I was just opening up
Hmm.
an old flame and I saw like just somebody's how I was sitting on somebody's lap at somebody's was like a great aunt or some distant aunt in central Illinois.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, I completely forgot about that that set of
Yeah.
like relatives and stuff. So you have those little sparks and but those little pieces are what makes us. It's all cumulative. Every day we have these little events, little things, little interactions, and it's so cumulative. We remember the big stuff, those big reflection points
Yeah.
in our existence, the weddings, the
Hmm.
births, the big things, but it's so many of the small stuff that really make us those tiny little building blocks that really make us who we are. So that's really cool that you found that passion within that preserving and archiving, if that's the right
Yeah.
term, but that and that made me think about it too because we have all these cell phones now, probably 30,000 pictures and these cloud-based things,
Yeah.
and we tried to do a gallery wall and I was like, I need some photos. And I just realized I'm like, oh man, I got to search through my phone just to find some vacation photos
Hmm.
and stuff like that. It's almost harder now. I don't know that I don't
Yeah.
know why it feels harder for me. Maybe it's just a mental barrier, but to find like just the photos. I don't know if it's just because there's more or
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
That's just it. There's so many now, and that's a service I'm rolling out next year. Is to Because now we've been around the digital age for a decade now of at least of iPhones and stuff.
Yeah.
Marrying that with the past and then consolidating, going through your electronic devices and getting all the digital photos. There's how many times you
Absolutely.
there's so many
Yeah.
duplicates, and there's software now that you can go through and we'll take those out. And one thing I've started doing with clients, and some of these, I get bins, and a lady gave me 86 photo albums.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
were heavy. You couldn't ship them to have them done because of the weight. I had 5 of those. What are they? 26-gallon black and yellow bins you get at Home Depot or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So we had 5 of those. My son had to help me carry them, and I'm like, this. I'm really conscious of cost for people too because I really want people to save their stuff. But if it's just
Yeah.
cost prohibitive, they're not going to do it. So what we did is I only scanned pictures and pages that had people in them.
Okay. Yeah.
How many pictures do you have of the sunset, like at Marco Island or something on spring break?
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
And the Grand Canyon, yeah, it's gorgeous, but do you need 30 photos? So I've been really working my clients to cull
Yeah.
the
Be a
herd
little
a
more
little bit.
selective.
Yeah, be a little
Yeah.
more selective because then it's affordable. And my goal really is just get as much preserved as we can. And you don't need
Yeah.
every picture. But on the flip side is I don't like to be the curator of photos with people because I don't know if that was the last time you saw Uncle Charlie. Is that the last
Okay.
picture you have of someone? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you got a very specific project and they
Yeah.
were very detailed.
Yeah.
But if it's just a catch all, like here's
And
Here's
that's
our history of everything.
I get a lot of catch
Yeah.
all. Like
Yeah.
I've had archives going back to the 1890s in families,
Ooh, that'd be
and they
cool.
have
Some
no
of those
idea.
old
Yeah, it was
ones.
before World War One, and I
Yeah.
actually found two
Wow.
postcards from World War One on the German side.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
it's really
Oh
neat
man.
stuff. An archive I'm closing out this weekend. The grandpa was a World War II bombardier in Japan.
Okay.
He wrote a letter to his. He left school and went into the war, so he wrote his professor a first-hand account of when we firebombed Tokyo,
Real. Oof.
and it was chilling. He said the seat in his plane was hot from the heat.
Real. Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
so I see a lot of really cool stuff, and
Yeah.
I see stuff that people don't even know they have,
I bet.
like
I bet.
gorgeous baptismal or confirmation certificates from Europe that are just works
Yeah.
of art from like the 1890s, and they're just
Yeah.
rolled up somewhere in a drawer, and they're gorgeous. They're really
Yeah.
works of art. People are like, oh, I didn't know I
Absolutely.
had that, and so now they frame them and they celebrate them.
Absolutely. Yeah. We had found my great grandfather's papers coming into this country. And he actually didn't go through Ellis Island in New York. He came through Chicago. There was a port in Chicago.
Really,
And
my mom came through Philadelphia, I believe.
okay. Yeah. So I think there were only a few key ones, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, that was really neat to see that, to your point. And on that same, I was going to say, my grandfather flew, he was a pilot in World War II, but he flew over Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and they would get off the planes and they would count the holes, the flak holes in their planes that they were just
Yeah,
flying. And he flew beyond beyond the amount of missions they were supposed to. I think he did 54 missions or something. They
yeah,
were only supposed to do, I forgot how many missions or something like that. But yeah, but to that point, I have no documentation, I have no pictures, anything, and that's going to get lost if I don't ever share that story too. Some
right.
of it too. It's obviously there's the tangible, hard memory piece, but there are those stories. There's a million stories of where that goes, and if I don't tell my boys that story, they're never going to hear. They're going to know that, and it's interesting too because to kind of surmise that, and then I forgive me, I just go off on a tangent for a second. I was going to say because my other great grandfather he was a streetcar driver during the Great Depression here in Chicago. So he
Mm-hmm.
was one of the only people that had a job at that time, you
Yeah,
know. So you hear those stories, but there's the memories and that pulls that. But it's like that. There's those. Do we define those people by that? And I guess we do without any additional context of how they lived their days and everything else. Without that kind of record or going through the process of like scanning like you're
mm-hmm.
doing, there's no transference.
No.
And I guess on the other side of that too is I guess you could scan a bunch of pictures and they're like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of people. So there's some of that too.
The good part is the people who came before us, they wrote on
Mm-hmm.
the back of photos a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that helps me when I'm trying to build an archive. It helps a lot. But like you were saying, when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, my dad's 90 years old or 95 or something," I go, sit with them and talk with them, and just there are services, and I have friends who have this business where they'll go and interview someone. But there's a generation that was like, I don't want to go on camera and talk, no matter how comfortable you are. So I tell people, let's take your iPhone out and put it on the coffee table and just
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Just do like an audio only.
yeah. And if they want to take pictures or film it, that obviously the more the better. But just hearing those stories and being able to have that archive, like I have a 10-second clip of my mom speaking at my wedding when they go around the table saying, "We wish you the best." That's the only audio I have of my mom's brogue. That friends
Wow.
used to call my house just to talk to my mom because they thought it was so cool.
Oh man. You know what just dawned on me? I don't have any.
Yeah,
I have no audio of my mother
yeah,
whatsoever. So yeah, it is fascinating. And even too, like you said, put that phone down. And now today all the audio gets transcripted.
mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah,
could easily just transcript that into a Word doc or whatever version of that is.
right,
I won't get into throw in a GPT and then surmise this conversation. But
right.
no, but those are to hear their words and to hear that recording would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
So
hearing stuff.
yeah, anybody listening to that for sure, anybody of age, try to do that. Get those old stories,
Mhm.
those little stories of when they were a kid and what kind of little bicycle they rode or whatever version of that is. Those
Yeah,
little or wagon they had or whatever it is.
hmm
I think those little nuanced little connection, emotional points are so powerful.
Yeah, and I try getting that across when I speak to groups. Talk about unleashing the power of our memories, and I take people on like a family road trip in my
Oh,
stories,
cool.
and I visit my clients. And one of my clients was battling ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease,
Hmm.
and I'd never had any experience with someone like that, and it was gut wrenching. That was the archive that went back to the 1890s in Germany. His parents somehow got out of Germany during the Holocaust.
Jesus.
And at this point, when I met him, he could only blink his eyes. And his partner, he had been together with Iris for 40 years. They never got married, but I never knew the story. But it was really difficult. But man, I put together 15 hours of slideshows and videos for him on the TV to watch. And when I gave it to him, the tears were flowing, and
I bet.
it was such a gift of love to them. It was amazing. But that's pretty powerful when someone's in that situation, to feel the
Yeah.
love of their family from all those years past. It's pretty powerful stuff. And that's the big story. And then I have a story about people downsizing from the big house where they raised their family in the suburbs, and now they
Sure.
have a 3-bedroom ranch. And they had
Hmm.
all these videotapes, say 4 bins of videotapes. And the woman was like, I gotta have these out of my house. I don't have room. So we put them on a thumb drive.
Nice.
And then the other story is that Bombardier, he came back from the war, and he went back to college on the GI Bill from fall of 46 to spring of 48. But his girlfriend was back in Chicago, and he went to a place called Illinois College. It's down in the middle of the state.
Hmm.
And he wrote her a love letter every day they were apart.
Oh
Every
my gosh.
single day. Sometimes twice a day, and on occasion 3 times a day.
Oh man.
And she saved every single one of them. Eventually they got married.
Yes.
And they were just arranged in this Tupperware little bin. And I'll digitize all the stories, the letters. And they said, well, we want you to do the envelopes too. I said, why do you want to do envelopes? And I open up the flap on one of them, and he would write a little love note on the flap of the envelope.
Oh, no
And
way.
so when she opened it, or he
Right.
drew a
Right.
caricature or something.
Oh, that's neat.
That project was
Yeah.
over 3,000 pages. And
Man.
but that's the story of how the family started. That's the love
Yeah.
story. That my client now is in his mid 60s, and his kids are now in their mid 20s or 30s, and they can read how grandma and grandpa's love story started, and it's really cool.
That's outstanding.
So
Yeah.
there is a lot of power in this. Like I told you about what my mom used to tell us about being on a boat for 9 days throwing up. When we all go through times in our lives when things are tough,
Hmm.
and these stories can stiffen up that backbone a little bit and give you a little more resolve to, like, all right, I can do this.
They can. And mine is my grandfather, childhood depression, Great Depression. He would say, you're crying with a loaf of bread under your arm. So obviously you have the resources with you, on you, whatever version of that is. And that's one of those ones you're crying with a loaf of bread under your arm.
Oh, that's a great
And
line. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
I
Because
never
they'll be
heard
like,
that
oh, I
one.
had to work. Yeah, grandpa, I had to work all these hours. And obviously it was many years ago.
Yeah.
So, you're crying with a loaf. And he would just repeat that to me all the time. And at the time I was like, whatever,
Yeah, right.
like,
Exactly.
but then you remember that and you're like, I am. I'm right now. I'm whining and I've got things of gratitude in my life. That's really the recognition there. And there was another one too. He ended up, I think the story was he stole a potato out of back of a restaurant or something like that. He and his buddy cooked it in a little fire in the alley or something like that, and some cinders, and it was all burnt. And that was the best potato I've ever had in my life. It's like,
Yeah.
you just hear these little anecdotal stories. And some of it is I walked in 8 feet of snow every day to school,
Right.
20 miles there and back. Thing. Some of that's them being expressive, but those are those little makeups and those little threads of, where our families and kind of those things that are ingrained in our belief systems too.
Mm-hmm.
How do those kind of transgress and translate? The things too, just talking to you, and the things that do stick with me are it's like all those little memories that, whether they're lost or they're not lost, they're in the recesses of our mind. And there's a lot of history, personal history, that just, it really does get lost with time, and it's gone within a generation or two if not handled or taken care of.
Yeah.
We have photo albums, and I keep saying, I'm like, I probably need to do something with these,
Yeah.
and just taking the time to think about it is just, I don't know, there's put it off till tomorrow, but they are
Right.
that's it. Those stories of how our families come together, how their families, how people met. Those are,
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that part about having to get to it, because so we're at an age now that VHS came into about the late 70s into 80s.
yeah,
And color photography, I want to say, was like the 70s ish, real good color photography.
sure, sure.
And these things have shelf lives that I don't think a lot
Oh,
of people realize.
good
Black and
point.
white photos survive pretty well, but the color photos, they'll start
They,
degrading.
they got that, is it sepia tone or that
Yeah,
like
some
kind
of
of
them
that?
do, yeah.
Yeah, they start to get a little bit of that.
Hmm. Especially
I know
slides.
exactly what you're,
Yeah.
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And you said the slides do too?
Yeah, I'm just part of this project because I've done probably 1,000 slides, and you can tell slides are really cool when you digitize them. They are
Oh,
so
really?
crisp. They're really cool looking.
I was going to just ask if they're really vivid,
Yeah,
because the edging of, because when you hold it up to the light, it does, there's a very dominant
yeah,
ridging and
they're
edging around
really
the,
neat. The only problem is that they're starting. You'll get it's not, and you have to blow them up too. You have to do them at like a 3200 DPI, which a photo is usually 600 to be a good
okay.
archival standard. So you do them at 3200, so you can see them. They're big enough, but it
Yeah.
picks up every imperfection. And a lot of them they've been sitting around for at least 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
So they're dirty, they're dusty.
Yeah.
But
Probably maybe in an attic that would get up to 100 and
yeah,
some degrees in the summer and then,
exactly.
sub
Or
below in the winter.
the
Yeah.
basement with
Just,
the humidity off the charts.
yeah, exactly.
So you'll see like the film will have some, you'll start seeing some green and red, like you can tell. So
Okay.
it's the actual elements breaking down. So
Oh,
there is,
like the chemical breakdown
yeah.
of it or
So there
something.
is that
Okay. Interesting.
concern, like the VHS tapes and that 8 millimeter tape, the real stuff,
Yeah.
it's getting brittle. So
Yeah.
it'll break,
So,
and I repair it at a point it's going to be gone.
oh yeah, no, that's really interesting. That makes sense. The actual physical material is going to break down, either
Yeah.
a chemical breakdown or just the material cracking and drying or whatever version of that is. So the 8 millimeter, the actual, I always hear that sound in my head where it goes flap, flap, flap at the end. And we had some of those videos, obviously before my time, but I forgot. But
Mhm.
so we did have somebody. This was probably back in maybe early 90s or something like that, late 80s, I don't even remember, but to try to convert those. And what they had it was projector, and then it was like this mirrored thing, and I think the mirror bounced it back and reflected it, and then it was actually being recorded on a big VHS
Uh-huh.
hand. So this is obviously pre all the technology
Mhm.
access that we have, but so it was a very mechanical exchange
Yeah,
between
it's cumbersome
8
too.
millimeter into VHS.
Yeah.
And it was like the guy had this whole contraption where it was projected onto a mirror and another mirror and back into the VHS camera or something like that. I remember that now. That was a memory I completely lost until this conversation.
Yeah.
Totally forgot about that. But
Yeah, I've had people tell me, "Oh, yeah, we took care of those slides. We got pictures of all the slides." How'd you do that? They put the projector up against the refrigerator,
oh,
and then
really?
they
And then
just
took
took a
images of
picture
it.
of it. All right.
Oh, too funny.
So you're really not capturing the picture there, but
Yeah.
you
I
got
mean, I
something to
guess
tell
there's
'em.
a representation there.
Yes,
Yeah.
people have done all kinds of stuff to preserve those memories. And if you think about it, I was thinking about this the other day. A camcorder was probably ran us around $300 back in the early '90s when I got my
Yeah.
first one. And then you had the tapes, and so we spent money
Oh,
capturing
yeah.
stuff, and we were
Yeah.
really bad videographers. Good lord.
Oh, it's terrible.
Was the butt
I
was
agree.
it on or off? Like I have a playground on the ground flopping around my hip. Then I go to take the picture of my kid on the swing, and I hit the button, it's off.
Yeah. And you turn it off. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot of great nuggets on those tapes, and they're a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of tears in my day of when I delivered a final product and I go through it with people,
I bet.
and it just touches
So,
them, especially if maybe grandma and grandpa are still around
yeah.
and they get to relive their memories of when
Yeah.
they were kids, about those fishing trips they used to go on. Everyone used to fish. I've noticed.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there were a lot of people who went fishing. They'd be out in a canoe in Wisconsin, many lakes in Wisconsin, and
Yeah.
they sit there, and the moms would prepare the fish. There's some great
Well,
photos.
it's funny. Two things from that I was going to say, but to add to the fishing thing is I remember we went camping as a kid too. But back then there wasn't all the theme parks
Yeah.
and yeah, Disney's been around for a while, but there wasn't I don't know if there just wasn't the entertainment level that kids have these days. Now there's all these like trampoline parks every other corner and
Yeah.
there's just all these different just entertainment venues. So I think even too for like the families, you'd pack up the cooler. I remember we would go for a weekend and go to White Pines, which is out like
That's
northwest,
a
I think,
dude
towards
ranch, right?
Galena.
That's a dude ranch. White Pines dude.
No, this one's in northwest Indiana, northwest Illinois. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
think towards like Galena. Is it a dude
Yeah.
ranch or something? Is it?
My girls went out there with the Girl Scouts.
Oh yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I haven't been there
Yeah.
decades, so maybe okay. But yeah, it was like you pack up the coolers and the sandwiches,
Hmm.
and it was very simple. That's my memory of it,
Yeah. They
anyways.
didn't have all
Maybe
the fast food either.
yeah, they didn't have all the access to the restaurants. They didn't even the grocery stores. It just
Hmm.
wasn't like that. Those smaller towns they didn't have
Yeah. When
Walmarts
you were
or
out there,
Target.
you were out there.
Yeah, 100%. And you were on your own with that and you had to entertain yourself too.
Hmm.
You don't have all the distractions but I think that was the thought on that stuff, but I think there was just like there wasn't what it is today from the entertainment or the escape and everything else. It was just a different time where people would just do much
Hmm.
simpler, straightforward things. And the other that too is you were talking about like the grandparents are still alive. Like all mine are passed away at this point, but I was thinking about it. I'm like, what an incredible bonding experience. Obviously with your children, with the children. If you do that, like you get to share that with your kids, or if your elderly parents or grandparents or whoever it is, uncles,
Hmm.
aunts, and all that stuff are still around. Like what a cool bonding experience to go over those family connections and family memories to share the stories. Because honestly, I think a lot of this comes back to those deep stories of who we are. Like that's like when you're saying this, what are those deep threads that kind of brought us to where we're at today?
Yeah. It's who we are.
And yeah, it really is. And so much of it was just so many little simple little events along the way. There's obviously, like I said, not to be redundant, but there's always the big ones,
Hmm.
the weddings, the birthdays, the passings, the births, but yeah, man, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you got me really reflecting on some of that past.
What's funny though is I've been thinking about. We just went through this election cycle, and it seemed like we've been at each other's throats as a society lately. Everyone's whatever for whatever
Mhm.
reasons. But
Sure.
man, I've done hundreds of family archives, and there's the births, there's
Yeah.
whatever religion you are, those special moments, the bar mitzvah or confirmations, christenings, whatever it is. There's the school plays, those are birthdays or
Mhm.
anniversaries, graduations. It's in some way we're all kind of living the same life,
Yeah.
all our own little
Oh, I could see
moments,
that.
and it's we're so much more alike than we are different. And I think that gets lost sometimes in the social media world. But
Yeah.
I
Thank you
tell
for
you, man,
that.
I
That's a
see it
really
all.
cool.
Like the someone will go on spring break for the eighth grade trip, or the Washington
Yeah.
D.C. trip with the eighth grade
Right.
trip, and they'll make a trip to Disney, or they'll go to the Grand Canyon or they'll do the out west. I call it the Griswold vacation.
Sure.
You got
Absolutely.
Yosemite, the Tetons,
Absolutely. All those. Yeah.
Yellowstone. It's just
Yeah. Zion. All those
yeah,
big national parks and
and
stuff.
that's what we do.
But you know what? I got to jump back to that, man. Thank you for that. That connection point. I believe in some ways we're all just having this human experience and the similarities are probably to that point so much greater than the differences, and the differences are mostly ideologies
Hmm.
and belief patterns, and they're somebody's wrong and I'm right, and it's but the actionable steps of our lives, we go on little vacations, we have the birthday parties, and we have all these things, and there's so many similarities. That's an incredible takeaway with our humanity or experience. It really is. And I guess if you got into the bigger scope of cultural countries, maybe there's different,
Hmm.
but a lot of it comes into even to you said based on religion. Is it a baptism? Is it a mitzvah? Is it a
Your wedding.
quinceañeras or whatever? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And but there's still points of reflection and still points of dedication or honoring a situation, and we have that in common.
Yeah.
So I really believe there's a real power in that, and that recognition is lost. I don't say lost. That's a doomsday gloom. I think that people still understand that at a
Hmm.
core level, but I think there does need to be a greater reminder for some of that we are more alike than not.
Yeah. And that's my concern with as we move into the digital age. I think we are losing too
Yeah,
much.
especially with representation. I'm sorry, I was going to just totally jumped on your what you're about to say, but especially with representation when you get into the Instagrams and all the social media platforms, because we're showing a version that's made up a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like we have these moments of that was exceptional, that was really neat, and we're in this cool place or this nice restaurant or whatever it is, and you capture this moment. But some of the reality of us putting our pants one leg at a time, the same as the next person, is does really get lost in the social media, in the digital age. And I think some of those special, capturing some of those special moments, even too with the quantity, like I said, I can't decide. I have a wall that I've got some frames I wanted to fill some pictures in. And I was on the struggle bus just trying to scroll through and find something, remember it, because I have so many thousands of pictures. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I have no judgment on it. It's just different. Back in the day, we would be more deliberate with what we only have. What was it? How many pictures were on a roll? It was like 24 or 32. I think there was a couple different size.
At one point there were only 16 and maybe 4 of those were good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You take the tester one, you just make sure you got that first one. And I remember those. And then there was the Insta cameras and stuff like that. But we were more deliberate. We were more, I want to be more intentional with this. I only have 16 or 24 or whatever the different roll sizes were. So I'm not going to snap off a bunch of the same ones.
Right.
Again, does that create a greater or less value? Probably not, but it just changes, I think, our views on it are just, if it's so accessible now, maybe it doesn't feel as special. Maybe I'm looking at that wrong with some of it.
Yeah, I think it's it might be just how you feel the day that you're looking at them too.
That's true too.
It's that lens that we all put in front of ourselves as we see everything and receive
for sure
our information. And I don't think it's good or bad either. It just is. But I know it's taking up a lot of memory on my phone.
It is. Yeah. That's why we have to pay for more cloud space now.
All the time. All the time. Another $1.99 a month.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like, I don't know. Do you get into the point where you do those highlights and then there's some of those highlight videos or something like that too? Or do they take that and then people do that on their own with those, like if some old photos or the video, you know what I'm talking about?
They'll do I don't offer that as a service right now. I'm still a small business. I don't have that type of staff to do that. And I have fixed some older videos. A woman came to me it was a real stuff and it was really dark and she just lost her husband of 45 years and he was given a toast at the wedding back in the early 70s. It was really dark. It was bad lighting and I really worked on that a while to get it so you could see him, but the amount of time that takes
absolutely
astronomical, and it's really tough to tell someone this is going to take me 3 hours to do. It's going to be X amount of dollars. It's right. Are you willing to pay $500-$600 to have me make this a little bit better?
Yeah,
it's
some people would. I mean,
some people will, but I don't have that time because I got other digitizing. Maybe eventually, first of all, it's going to be trying to get this digital stuff curated more so it can be continuing through time and build the archive so people can keep adding to it. And that's what I really want to do is that type of stuff. But like I said, it breaks my heart if I hear people say, "Oh yeah, I just threw it in my drawer." Why don't you just leave it in a bin in the attic? Because kids, and you talk about social media, Veterans Day. Wasn't Grandpa in the Army? Go through here, pictures. There you go. Google. They're probably tagged Army. All the Army photos. You can post those. You can post whatever you want, or make something for Grandma or Grandpa for the holidays. It's digital. You can put it on anything.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that visual representation is pretty powerful. It's funny too, because I think of the parallel of what's the ancestry.com or something, or DNA. This is just a me thing. This is my opinion, but the DNA is fine, but I think where I came from specifically and all these people in my past, I just go back to it. That's a real powerful thing.
Yeah. I get clients who are going through that. The client with the World War II guy, they started doing Ancestry. And so there's usually one person in the family. It's like the keeper of all the photos. And stuff.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, they inherited it somehow for some reason. They might be a pack.
Or somebody's hoarding it. I don't know. Somehow there's some weird ownership or something.
So they got it all together because of Ancestry. And now they're like,
Okay.
and then it was someone here in Palatine who heard that I was building a living digital archives, and they wanted to know what that
Yeah.
was about. And so that's how I got connected with them. And it's been a great journey. I've been working on it since January, and I'm just finishing
Oh,
up.
beautiful.
There's been three
Yeah.
phases because there's so much.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So a lot of history, a lot of cool stuff, you know.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So one more kind of subject before we close out here was I want to go back to that connective tissue because I think that's really drove it home for me. I guess some of those commonalities you mentioned, the big things. Do you see any other kind of just commonalities or resonant behaviors or anything like that with seeing all these different photos? Is there any other little lessons or something you picked up in there?
What I really like, what's really interesting is the 20th century was an incredible century of growth here in America.
Oh yeah,
So I see families that they're staying at the motel up in the Dells as their kids,
yeah,
and by the time they get to the 90s, they're in the Bahamas, and it's just a weird juxtaposition. This is where they came from, scraping by, doing these little quick family vacations.
yeah. Or the camping
Yeah,
trips, like
in a little
not even
cabin next
hotels,
to
the
a
camping
lake,
trips.
which I don't
Yeah,
know if you can find those places anymore because they looked
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And now they're flying somewhere, and just the change in not sort of economic change, but even how the world has changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Accessibility, there are the social
Mm-hmm.
economics, but there is the accessibility to more flights. Locations have become more just centric on tourism and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
too. But yeah, that's a really neat one too. So that time frame, that time capsule of different time,
Yeah.
the 1910s or the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you get to see some of those changes and some of those probably big jump points.
Mm-hmm.
Those I can imagine because I was born in the 70s, but I think about if that life from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and it just really everything
Yeah.
keeps us supersizing. Or
Mm-hmm.
that's a really cool one too. That's just to see that in such a short period of time. We're talking about 100, 18, 10, what are we talking about? 830 years,
Yeah.
or maybe there's some older photos, 150-year span or whatever that
Yeah.
you've seen in that window. That's a ton of change globally and
Mm-hmm.
domestically.
Yeah. My father-in-law is 87, and he still remembers rationing in World War II.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty. Because did you watch Masters of Air on Apple? The Spielberg.
No, I haven't seen that. Yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but I've seen I've seen that it's there, but I haven't watched
Yeah,
it.
because
Yeah.
after the war, I said, "Boy, can you imagine that feeling?" And he looked over. He goes, "Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
there. No, I know what happened. I was a young kid, but he was like in third grade, I think, when the war ended. And he said, "You remember that? I remember the rationing of its supplies and everything. It was pretty
Yeah,
wild."
all the metals and everything else too. It's just
In
and the
that
food.
archive I have, there's this thing. It looks like an old-fashioned slide rule. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I didn't know what it was, and it was in the guy's college stuff. And I'm like, well, he was like an econ major. Why does he have this mechanical device? And I'm watching Masters of Air, and it was in the plane. The
Really?
navigator used it.
I was going to ask, was it a navigator tool?
He
Yeah.
calculated airspeed and altitude from some calculation. It had a
Right.
plastic disc on it. It was really cool. And I took a picture of it on TV and I sent it to my client. I go, "Do you know what this is?" And they didn't know what it was. And I'm like, "It was just in the Masters of Air. It's used." I
Yeah.
Googled it, and actually, I know some pilots, and they said, "Yeah, we still call it. It's called an E360 or something, just in case
Sure.
computers go down. They still train on it."
They still train on it. I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
That's cool. That is cool, man. So, John Doherty, thank you so much for joining. I've really enjoyed this too. That connectivity, those threads, that human connection, and those observable views, man.
Yeah.
So, thank you for joining.
Sure. I'm lucky I get to do what I do. I really enjoy it. And
Yeah,
it's my mission I've chosen to preserve and protect as much as I can.
love it. Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.